Picture an oven. A big one. Big enough to hold a city of 800,000 people. Now turn it on in June and don't turn it off until September. Add brick tenements that soak up heat all day and release it all night, so that at 3 in the morning the walls of your bedroom are still warm to the touch. Add asphalt streets that go soft under your shoes, horses dropping dead in their harnesses on Broadway, a river you can smell from a mile away, and hospitals so full that they're laying patients on the lawns outside. That's St. Louis, Missouri, in July of 1936. The hottest summer ever recorded in American history. A summer that killed more Americans than some wars. A place where you could watch a man faint face first into the gutter in the morning and see families dragging mattresses into the park to sleep under the stars by evening. Thousands of them. A whole city lying down outdoors because indoors had become a death sentence. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists reading thermometers. We're living it. One day, one person, everything he would have carried, sweated, lifted, feared, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about heat stroke and horse carcasses and ice that's worth more than silver. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable, preferably somewhere cool. Here we go. The ice burns your hands before the sun is even up. That's the joke nobody at the plant finds funny anymore, because it's true. It's 4:30 in the morning, the coolest hour of the entire day. The thermometer outside the loading dock already reads 84 degrees, and your palms are on fire from the cold. You're hauling 300-pound blocks of ice across a wet plank floor with a pair of iron tongs, and the frost bites through the burlap pads on your hands, and the muscles between your shoulder blades have been aching since the second week of June, and you have not been dry, truly dry, in 31 days. Your name is Eli Kowalczyk. You're 19 years old, and if you drop a block this morning, if a single one of these blocks slides off the truck and shatters on the cobblestones, the cost comes out of your pay, and your pay is $14 a week, and there are 40 men who lined up outside this plant yesterday morning asking if anyone had quit, died, or fainted. 3 of those things happened last week. All 3 positions were filled by noon. That's the arithmetic of the summer of 1936. Not profit margins, bodies. There is always another body waiting for your job, because this is the 7th year of the Great Depression, and a job that pays $14 a week for the privilege of destroying your spine is a job men will fight over. Literally fight. You saw 2 of them do it, right there on the dock, over a route that opened up when Stanek collapsed on Shuto Avenue with the tongs still in his hands. Stanek was 34. The newspaper listed him with the others in a column that gets longer every day. Heat prostration, they call it. The word makes it sound gentle, like lying down. It is not gentle. So you don't drop the block. You get your hips under it. The way old Novak taught you your first week, back when your hands were still soft, back when this was still June and everyone was saying it would break soon. The heat, it always breaks. You get your hips under it and you let your legs do the lifting because your back is already spent and it's not yet 5 in the morning, and you slide the block down the chute onto the bed of the truck where it lands with the sound like a coffin closing, a deep wooden boom you feel in your teeth. Then the next one, then the next, 20 blocks. 6,000 pounds of frozen water, cut and scored and stacked and covered with canvas tarps and a layer of sawdust. Because from the moment that ice leaves the plant, it is dying. That's the thing you understand now that you didn't understand in May, when you stepped off the truck from the Ozarks with a cardboard suitcase and your mother's Bible and 11 cents. Ice in July of 1936 is not a product. It is a countdown. Every minute it sits on that truck, it sheds itself into the gutter. On a normal summer day, you lose maybe 8% of the load to melt. This summer, on the bad days, the days over 105, you lose a quarter of it. A quarter of the load, a quarter of the money, running off the tailgate in a bright little stream that children follow down the street with their tongues out. And here is the part that sits in your stomach like a swallowed stone. The hotter it gets, the more people need the ice, and the faster it disappears before you can bring it to them. The city is drinking its own lifeline as fast as you can carry it. Novak swings up into the driver's seat and spits over the side. He's 51 years old, built like a fire hydrant, with forearms so thick the veins on them look like tree roots, and a face the sun has cooked to the colour of an old saddle. He's been hauling ice in this city for 30 years, through summers and strikes, and the year the river froze so hard they cut ice straight out of it. And he has exactly one thing to say about the summer of 1936. "This one's a killer," he says. He said it the first morning you worked with him, and he says it now, and it isn't a complaint. It's a weather report. You climb up beside him. The vinyl seat is already warm. Everything is already warm. That's the thing the numbers don't tell you, the thing you'd have to live to know. The heat never leaves anymore. It used to be that night was a truce. Now the city holds the heat the way a brick oven holds it. In the walls, in the streets, in the iron fire escapes, in the water pipes, so that the water comes out of the tap warm as spit. And 84 degrees at 4:30 in the morning feels almost cool. Feels like mercy, because you know what's coming. Yesterday, it was 106 in the shade downtown, the day before 104. The radio says today might be worse. Novak lets out the clutch and the truck rolls off the dock into the dark. 6,000 pounds of dying ice groaning behind you, and the city of St. Louis lies out there in the last of the night, breathing like something sick waiting for the sun. The first hour is the tenements. You work the near south side, the streets between the breweries and the river, block after block of flat-faced brick buildings, 3 and 4 stories tall, built cheek to cheek so that no air moves between them, and every one of them full in a way that's hard to picture now. A family to a room, sometimes 2 families, boarders sleeping in shifts, day workers in the beds at night, night workers in the same beds by day, the sheets never cooling, never even having the chance. Novak works the curbside and you work the buildings, and the buildings are where the summer lives. You take the first block of the morning, a 25-pounder, swing it up against your shoulder blade on the leather pad, and push through the street door of the tenement on 9th Street, and the smell meets you before the darkness does. It's layered, the way it always is. Cabbage boiled last night, and the night before that, gone sour in the trapped air. Kerosene from the cook stoves. The sharp ammonia reek of the shared toilet on the landing. 1 toilet for 6 families, and the door doesn't close all the way. Under that, the smell of hot brick itself. A dry mineral smell like the inside of a kiln. And under everything, the smell of people, of bodies that have been sweating for 5 weeks straight in rooms where the windows open onto air shafts that carry no air, including yours. You stopped being able to smell yourself somewhere in June. That's not an improvement. That's surrender. The stairs are wooden and they've dried out in the heat so that every step shrieks. 2nd floor. 3rd. The ice is melting against your back through the leather pad, a cold trickle finding the channel of your spine, and this is the strange privilege of your job. the thing the men at the plant call the Iceman's blessing. You are the only worker in this city who spends his day pressed against something cold. It is also 25 pounds grinding down on the muscle beside your neck, and by the 40th delivery of the day you stop calling it a blessing. Third floor rear. The Vasiliauskas family. You don't knock anymore. The card is in the window, the printed card the ice company gives out. A square you turn to show how many pounds you want. 25 on this side, 50 on that, and the card in this window has said 25 every day since you took the route, though the family behind the door is 8 people. Mrs. Vasiliauskas opens before your knuckles touch the wood. She's maybe 40 and looks 60. A small woman in a house dress gone translucent with washing, and behind her the single room opens up in the grey light. 2 beds, a table, a stove that no one has dared light in a month, and children. Children on the beds, children on the floor on folded blankets. One child, the smallest, lying in the wash tub itself, in 2 inches of water, because that's the coolest place in the room. And the mother has figured that out the way mothers figure everything out, by trying it. The icebox is an oak cabinet by the window, and you slide the block into the top compartment with your tongs, and here is the humiliation of it, the small daily insult you carry down the stairs with you every morning. 25 pounds of ice in this heat in this room will not last the day. It will be water by supper time. She knows it. You know it. 50 pounds would last, but 50 pounds costs 15 cents more, and 15 cents is a loaf of bread and a quart of milk, and there is a child in the wash tub, and so the card says 25, and every day this woman chooses between keeping the milk cold and buying the milk at all. She presses a dime and a nickel into your hand. The coins are warm from wherever she keeps them. Everything is warm. Hot today, she says. It's not a question, and it's not small talk. In July of 1936 in these buildings, it's a diagnosis. Hot today, you say. You will have this exact conversation 40 more times before noon. Nobody in this city talks about anything else, because there is nothing else. The heat is not weather anymore. It's the landlord. It's the government. It's God. It sits on every conversation and every meal and every hour of half sleep, and it takes its rent in the oldest currency there is. On the 2nd floor landing, coming down, you pass the door of the old man. Room 5. Mr. Brower. His card hasn't been in the window in 3 days, and his door is shut. And shut doors are the thing you've learned to fear this summer, because a shut door in a heat wave means either the family has fled to sleep in the park, or it means the other thing. You stand there a moment, 25 pounds of the next delivery cutting into your shoulder, listening. Nothing. No shuffle, no cough, no radio. You should knock. You're already behind schedule. The ice is bleeding out on the truck downstairs. Novak is leaning on the horn, and it is not your job to knock on the doors of old men. There are 800,000 people in this city, and it is not your job. You knock. Nothing. You knock again, harder, and call his name, and the sound dies in the hot stairwell, and downstairs the horn blares again, and you stand there with the cold soaking through your shirt and the sweat running into your eyes, caught between the schedule and the silence. And this is the moment, right here on this dark landing that smells of kerosene and cabbage, when the summer of 1936 stops being a temperature and becomes a thing with teeth. Because behind that door, it turns out, there is a man, and he is still alive, and by the end of this day, one of the two of you will be carried out of a building on a stretcher, but you don't know that yet. Right now, you just know the horn is blowing, and you make yourself a promise. The kind of small promise that keeps a person human in a summer like this. You'll come back at the end of the route. You'll knock again. If there's no answer by evening, you'll find the janitor, you'll find a cop, you'll get the door open. You carry the promise down the shrieking stairs along with the tongs and the empty pad, and you step out into the street, and in the 20 minutes you're inside, the sun has come up. It comes up red. It's been coming up red all month, and the old men on the stoops say it's dust, that the sky is full of dirt blown 1,000 miles off the plains, off farms that have simply stopped being farms. And that's true. That's exactly what it is. Out west of here, in Kansas and Oklahoma and the Dakotas, this same summer is beating the land itself to death. 121 degrees in Kansas this month. 120 in South Dakota. The corn crop is dying, standing up. Whole counties of it. The leaves curled into grey scrolls, and the topsoil is in the sky, and some of that sky is over St. Louis this morning, filtering the sunrise the colour of an infected wound. You look at that sun coming up over the river, and you feel it the way you'd feel a hand closing on the back of your neck. 6 in the morning, 91 degrees. Novak pulls the truck out into the traffic on Broadway, in among the market wagons and the streetcars, and the day begins in earnest. And I need you to understand what a day means now. This isn't modern hot, where you hurry from one cooled room to another, and the heat is a hallway between refuges. There are no refuges. Air conditioning exists in 1936 the way ocean liners exist. You've heard of it. It's real, and it has nothing to do with you. A few movie palaces have it, and they hang banners out front with icicles painted on the letters, and people pay their dime as much for the air as for the picture. A few department stores, a few office buildings downtown for the men whose names are on the doors. For the other 799,000 people, there is shade, there is water, there is ice if you can pay for it, and there is the slow, grinding endurance of the body hour after hour. And the body this summer is losing. They will count it up afterward, the people who count such things. Around 5,000 dead across the country in the summer of 1936, some say more. The deadliest heat wave in American history before or since. In St. Louis alone, hundreds. The city will run out of room at the morgue. But nobody on Broadway this morning knows those numbers yet because they're still being written, one shut door at a time. What people know is smaller and sharper. They know the horse. It's down at the corner of Broadway and Sierra, a big grey gelding still in the traces of a produce wagon, down on its side on the cobbles with its legs out straight and its barrel heaving, and the carter is kneeling at its head doing nothing, because there is nothing. And a crowd is standing in the red morning light watching a 1,500-pound animal be killed by the air. The city's been losing horses all month, dozens a day at the peak of it. The rendering wagons can't keep up. You can smell where they haven't kept up some mornings, on certain blocks near the stockyards. Novak slows the truck as you pass. He doesn't say anything. He takes off his cap for a second, just a second, and puts it back on, and drives. 30 years hauling ice, and the man takes his cap off for a horse. You file that away in the place where you keep the things you're learning about people this summer. It's getting to be a crowded place. The morning route runs south along the river, and the river is its own lesson. The Mississippi has shrunk. It's fallen so far in the drought that mud flats have opened up along the banks, cracked grey plates of riverbed that haven't seen the sun in years, and boys are out on them already at 6 in the morning digging for whatever the river left behind. The water that remains moves slow and brown and warm, and it stinks. A rich, rotten vegetable stink that rides the heat straight up into the streets. This is the drought under the heat wave, the second jaw of the trap. The heat is killing the people, and the drought is killing the country, the whole middle of it, and the two of them together are what makes 1936 the worst of it. Worse than 34, worse than anything the oldest men on the docks can name. Between stops, hauling, you fall into the rhythm that gets you through the hours. Tongs in, hips down, lift with the legs, block to the shoulder. Don't think about the shoulder. Up the stairs, card in the window, block in the box, coins in the pouch. Chip a sliver off the corner of the block for the kids who follow the truck. Because there are always kids following the truck now. A ragged parade of them at every stop. Barefoot on cobblestones, hot enough to blister, holding out their hands, and the company says the chips are money and every chip is theft. And Novak hands them out anyway with a face like it's a toll he's paying, and so you do too. A sliver of ice in a child's mouth on a 100-degree morning. You've watched their whole bodies change when it touches their tongue, the shoulders dropping, the eyes closing. There are men in this city doing more important work than you this summer, but not many, and none of them get to see the results that fast. By 8 o'clock your shirt is soaked through, dried stiff with salt and soaked through again. There's a white tide line of salt on the brim of your cap. Your hands have gone past aching into a kind of buzzing numbness where the tongs have worn their grooves and the skin at the base of your fingers has split in the same places it split last week. Thin red cracks that the ice water finds every single time. A small, bright pain. Over and over like a note struck on a piano. You've drunk so much water your stomach sloshes when you climb, and you're still thirsty. You're always thirsty. Everyone in this city is always thirsty. The soda fountains are running out of ice by noon. The taverns are serving beer at cellar temperature and calling it cold, and nobody argues because arguing takes strength. 97 degrees at 8 in the morning. The pavement is starting its shimmer, and the strange thing, the thing you couldn't have explained to yourself back in May, is that some part of you has started keeping score, watching the thermometers in the drugstore windows the way other men watch a ball game, because the numbers this summer aren't just numbers. The whole country is watching them. The heat wave is on the front page of every paper in America, next to the drought and the dust, and the radio reads the temperatures of the cities at night like casualty lists. Omaha 110, Kansas City 109, Springfield 111, and there's a horror in it, but there's something else in it too, something nobody says out loud. Pride, almost. The dark pride of people inside a catastrophe. Whatever else is true, they will say for the rest of their lives, I was there for the summer of 36, if they get a rest of their lives. That's the fine print. At the corner of 7th and Rutger, a woman flags the truck down, not a customer. She's maybe 25, in a factory smock, and she's got a man with her, propped against the wall of the shoe factory, a big man of about 50 with a face gone the wrong colour, a grey-red, the colour of raw brick, and his eyes half open and not tracking, and his skin, when you get close, is dry. Dry. That's the thing. You know it now the way you know the smell of gas. A man in this heat should be pouring sweat, and when the sweat stops, when the body gives up the last thing it knows how to do, that's not fatigue anymore. That's the machinery failing. They've printed instructions in the newspapers right next to the death lists. Get them cool. Get them cool any way you can. Fast. Because the body is cooking from the inside, and the difference between a man who sits down dizzy and a man in a coffin can be 20 minutes. Novak is out of the cab before you've finished understanding, moving fast for a fire hydrant of a man, and he doesn't ask anybody's permission. He drops the tailgate, hooks the tongs into a 50-pound block and swings it down onto the sidewalk. 7 cents a pound of company property, and he takes the pick and splits it. 1 crack, 2, and then the 2 of you are packing splinters of ice against a stranger's neck, into his armpits, against the crooks of his elbows, the places Novak knows without thinking, and the woman is fanning him with a folded newspaper, whose headline, you notice, in the flat way you notice things at such moments, is about the heat. The man's eyes come back slowly, not all the way, but he makes a sound and his hand moves fumbling toward the cold at his neck, holding it there, and the woman starts to cry without any noise at all, and a cop arrives, and then it's out of your hands into the system, the overloaded groaning system, the ambulances that are running all day now, city hospital where they've got the corridors lined with cots and electric fans blowing across cakes of ice in wash basins, because that's the treatment, that's the best medicine 1936 has. Ice, the thing on your truck, the thing melting through the floorboards at a rate of dollars per hour while you stand on this sidewalk. Novak writes the lost block in the little book he keeps in his shirt pocket. The company will want it accounted for. He writes it in his own column, the one that comes out of his own pay, and he closes the book, and he looks at you. Drink, he says, meaning you, meaning now. He watches you do it, a full dipper from the water can, and then a second one, and he watches like a foreman inspecting work because he has hauled ice through 30 summers and buried men from his own dock this one, and hydration is not a suggestion he makes. It is the whole of his religion. Man stops sweating, Novak says, climbing back into the cab. Man's already half in the ground. You remember what that looked like. You remember. You will remember it at 4 o'clock this afternoon, on a 3rd-floor landing when it matters. 9 in the morning, 100 degrees, and going up like something let off a leash. The mid-morning run takes you up out of the tenements and into a different city, and this is where the summer shows you its other face. Westward, away from the river, the streets widen. The bricks turn from soot black to warm red, and then the bricks give way to stone, and by the time the truck noses into the private streets off Lindell Boulevard, you're in a St. Louis that the family on 9th Street will never see except from a streetcar window. Mansions set back on lawns, and the lawns in the 6th week of drought are being watered. That's the first thing you notice every time, the sprinklers ticking around in slow silver circles at 9 in the morning, throwing water into air that eats it, keeping grass green for people who've gone to Michigan. Because that's the other thing the rich do with a heat wave. They leave. Half these houses are shuttered for the season. The families up north at the lake resorts where the papers say it's a lovely 78, and the houses stand here in the heat with their awnings down like closed eyes, staffed by skeleton crews of maids and gardeners who keep the ice cards in the windows just the same. Some of the biggest houses don't even need you anymore. They have the new electric refrigerators, the humming white monuments with the coil on top, $400, more than half a year of your wages, and every one of them that gets installed is a house that comes off somebody's route forever. Novak calls them the coffins. He means it as a joke about the shape. He also doesn't. But most still take ice, and they take it in quantity. £100 at the service entrance of the Chandler house, where the cook, a broad Alsatian woman who's the only human being you'll see there, has you put it in a icebox the size of a wardrobe, already holding roast beef, cream, butter, a shelf of bottled beer, and a crystal bowl of peaches. You slide the block in beside the peaches with your split hands, and the cold air of the box breathes out against your face, and for 2 seconds you stand in that breath, and then the cook says, "Mind you don't drip on my floor and you're back out in the sun." The service alley behind the house is cool though. Genuinely cool, stone-shaded, a full 15 degrees below the street, and the gardener is sitting in it on an upturned crate, an old black man named Mr. Tillman, who you've come to know these past weeks the way you come to know men on a route, in 2-minute instalments. He has a habit you like. He keeps a thermometer nailed to the alley wall, and he reads it out to you like a man reading a racing form. 99 in the shade, he says this morning. In the shade now. Shade's supposed to be the place you go to be spared. He hands you the dipper from his own water bucket without being asked. That's the etiquette of this summer, an etiquette that's grown up in 6 weeks the way etiquette usually grows up in a century. Water is offered. Between strangers, between men who wouldn't share a lunch counter in this city, the dipper passes, because everyone has understood in their bones that the heat is not particular about whom it kills, even if the city is very particular indeed about where people are allowed to escape it. The public pools on this side of town, Mr. Tillman's grandchildren cannot enter. The park where thousands will sleep tonight they can, but at their own end of it. The heat wave is democratic. Nothing else here is. You sleep in, you ask him, because that's the other question of the summer, the second verse after Hot Today. On the porch roof, he says. Whole family. My wife puts the sheets in the icebox in the afternoon, takes them out at bedtime, he considers. First 10 minutes are the finest thing in this world. Then it's just a hot sheet again. He says it dry and even, and then he says the other thing, the thing everyone gets to eventually if you stand with them long enough this July. Buried my neighbour Tuesday, 61 years old, went up to his room after supper, and the room finished him. He looks at the thermometer, at the sprinklers ticking on the lawn beyond the alley's shade. They're watering the grass, son. He doesn't say anything else about it. He doesn't have to. You carry the tongs back to the truck past the sprinklers, through the drifting cool mist of them, water thrown into the air by machinery while a mile east of here a mother is choosing between milk and the ice to keep it in, and you're 19, and you don't have words yet for what that arrangement is called. But you can feel the shape of it, the way you can feel a storm before it shows over the horizon. A lot of people in this country are feeling the shape of it, this 7th summer of the Depression. It's in the speeches on the radio. It's in the strikes. It's in the way Novak says the coffins. 11 o'clock, 103. The load is going fast now, both ways it can go. The tarps steam. The sawdust is soaked dark. The melt runs off the tailgate in a steady rope of water, and the children appear at every stop like gulls behind a fishing boat. You're down to hoarding the cold, packing the remaining blocks tight, edge to edge, because ice protects ice. A mass of it dying slower than any single block alone. And there's a lesson in that too if you were in the mood for lessons, but you're not, because your body has entered the part of the day it will not let you ignore. Here is what 6 hours of hauling ice in a heat wave does, itemized, because the body itemizes. The shoulder first, a deep, bruised socket of pain where the blocks ride, so worked in by now, that the leather pad feels like it's resting on bare nerve. The hands cramping around the tongue grips so that between stops you have to pry the fingers straight with the other hand, and the salt of your own sweat finds the cracks at the knuckles every time that same bright piano note, bright, the eyes stinging permanently, the sweatband of your cap long since defeated, the feet cooking, the cobblestones radiate through boot leather like stove iron, and you've learned to stand on the wet patches where the melt runs, the way the horses, the ones still upright, are standing wherever a shadow falls, heads down, worlds narrowed to the next patch of dark. And the tiredness, not sleepy tiredness, a cellular flatness, a sense of the body running its accounts and finding them short because nobody in this city has truly slept in weeks. You sleep in installments now, an hour here before the heat of the room wakes you, an hour on the fire escape with your legs through the railings, 20 minutes at dawn. The whole city is doing it. You can see it in every face on every stoop, a specific hollow-eyed patience, 800,000 people running on broken sleep and warm water, shuffling through the necessary motions of a city, selling, hauling, cooking over cold suppers, waiting for the break in the weather that the forecasters keep promising sideways and that keeps not coming. There's a man on the radio who says the Gulf air will push up by the weekend. He said that last weekend. Novak has a theory that they let him keep saying it the way you let a fiddler keep playing on a sinking ship. At noon, by union habit and Novak's iron law, you eat in the shade of the truck itself on the shaded running board, because the truck is the only shade that travels with you. Bread and lard and a wrinkled tomato, and Novak shares out coffee from a thermos, hot coffee, which he swears by. Hot on the inside makes the outside feel cooler, and you drink it because you drink kerosene if Novak swore by it. The man has outlived this job for 30 years. Around you, the noon streets have gone strange and empty. The city has learned 5 weeks in what desert cities have always known. Noon is not for humans. Storefronts stand open and unattended. A streetcar goes by half empty, all its windows down, the passengers arranged singly, each in their own seat, because nobody in St. Louis wants to touch another human being ever again. On the wall above the running board, a city notice pasted fresh this week. Is already sun-bleached to pale lilac. You've read it so many times you could recite it. Precautions against heat. Avoid exertion during the hours of greatest heat. You look at that line, and then at the tongs line across your knees, and Novak follows your eyes. And for the first time today the old man laughs, a short 2-note bark with no anger in it at all. Avoid exertion, he says. He folds the last of his bread into his mouth. Up, boy, 60 more stops. And then he says the thing that will turn out to be the hinge of the whole day, though neither of you knows it. He says, "We'll swing back through 9th Street at the end. You can knock on your old man's door." Because you'd told him, somewhere in the morning between stops, you'd told him about room 5 and the missing card and the silence, half expecting to be told it wasn't your business, the schedule, the melt. And Novak had driven for a while and said nothing, and now this. 60 more stops, and then the door. You get up. Your knees have stiffened in the 10 minutes of sitting. They fire off their complaints and fall in line. You hook the tongs into the next block. £25 for the midwife on solar. Hips down, legs up, the cold against the raw shoulder, almost a kindness now. And the afternoon opens in front of you like the door of a furnace. 1 o'clock, 105 degrees. The all-time record for this city, the one they'll still be citing a century from now, is 108. The record does not know it yet, but it has 3 days left to live. The afternoon is when the city starts to break in the open. You see it first in small ways, the way you'd see a rope fraying before it parts. A druggist standing in his own doorway pouring water over his head from a measuring pitcher, methodically like a man watering a plant. A tavern with a hand-lettered sign, no ice, no beer, cold sorry. 2 women fighting, actually fighting, slapping and grabbing. Overposition at a public fountain that's running at a trickle because the pressure is down. The whole city pulling on the water mains at once, the pressure dropping every afternoon like a tired pulse. Kids have figured out the fire hydrants, of course. Every few blocks there's one wrenched open, a white rooster tail of water full of shrieking children, and behind it somewhere a fireman or a water department man coming to shut it off. Not because he wants to. You can see in the men's faces that they'd rather do anything else on earth. But because the pressure is the pressure. And if the hydrants run all afternoon and a fire starts in one of these tinder-dry blocks, in this wind, off these dried-out wooden stairs you've been climbing all day, then the summer of 1936 will get a second chapter that makes the first look gentle. Everything is dried out. That's the afternoon's other discovery. The whole city has been kilned. Wooden porch rails split along their grain. Cobblestone joints gape where the tar has run out of them like candy. In the little park on Lafayette, the grass isn't brown, it's gone, worn and burned to bare dirt, and the great trees stand over it with their leaves hanging slack and dusty, and even they look like they're only staying upright out of habit. At 2 o'clock on Allen Avenue, you lose your first block of the day to the heat directly. It's the last block in the load sun corner, a 50, and when you set the tongs and heave, the whole face of it shears off, rotten with melt, and 50 pounds becomes 30 in one wet crash on the cobbles, and the children materialise out of doorways before the pieces stop sliding, and you stand there, and then you shrug and step back and let them have it. A little girl picks up a shard the size of a kitten and holds it against her chest, against her sternum, both arms wrapped around it, eyes shut, the melt running down her dress, and she doesn't eat it, doesn't lick it, just holds it, the way you'd hold something you loved. Novak writes 30 pounds in the book, his column again. "You know what my wife's got in our icebox right now," he says, swinging back into the cab. "Nothing. Bare shelf and the pan under it. Iceman's family, no ice. Cobbler's children." He wrestles the truck into gear. 30 years, and this is the first summer I've been ashamed to bring the stuff home. Feels like carrying bread past starving men. 2:30, 106. The city record starts looking over its shoulder. The route grinds east again, back down toward the river into the last long leg, and the ice sings its one note behind you, drip and boom and drip, the blocks shifting as they shrink, and you're at the stage of the afternoon where your mind narrows the way the horses' minds narrow. Next stop, next shade, next dipper. You've stopped sweating freely. You notice it in an abstract way, the shirt drying on your back in the wind of the truck's motion, and some clear, cold voice from way back in the morning. Novak's voice is saying, "Man, stop sweating. Man's half in the ground." And you drink again from the can even though your stomach has been done with water for hours, because the voice is right and the stomach is wrong. And it's here, in the flattened, ringing middle of the afternoon, at the corner where 9th Street comes back into view with its shut doors and its shrieking dry stairs, that the day stops being a route. Because there's a crowd on the sidewalk outside your building. The building, room 5, and crowds in this city this summer mean exactly one thing. and you're out of the truck with the tongs still in your hand before Novak has fully stopped. And the crowd turns to look at you the way crowds turn, all at once, like one animal, and an old woman you recognize from the second floor says the words that ice water down your spine has been rehearsing you for all day. "Somebody's got to go up," she says. Nobody can get him to answer. And the janitor's gone to the park with his family, and the policeman went by 20 minutes ago and never came back, and somebody's got to go up. The stairwell at 3 p.m. is a chimney. The building has been drinking sun through its brick face since 5 this morning, and the stairwell is where it exhales. A shaft of stopped air 10 degrees hotter than the street, and you go up it 2 steps at a time with your heart going like a hammer on a boiler, past the second floor, past the smell of kerosene and cabbage that has been the smell of your whole summer, up to the landing where you stood this morning and made a small promise, and you hammer on the door of room 5 and shout the old man's name, and this time, from the other side of the door there is a sound, not a voice, a dragging, cloth on wood, the sound a man makes when he can hear you and cannot answer, when he's down on a floor in a locked room that has spent 9 hours becoming an oven, and the sound goes through you like nothing in your 19 years has gone through you, and you stop knocking. You put your shoulder to the door. The dry wood shrieks, the lock holds. You back up 2 steps, all the room the landing gives you, and this time you put your whole day into it, the shoulder that has carried 3 tons of ice since 4:30 this morning, and the frame splits with a sound like the summer itself cracking, and the door swings in, and the room's heat rolls out over you thick as water, and there on the floor between the bed and the window in a square of merciless sun is Mr. Brower, and his skin, when you touch him, is dry and hot. Hot the way a loaf is hot when you take it from the oven, heat coming up out of him, out of a human being, and his eyes are open a slit and his lips are moving around no sound at all, and he is 80 pounds of a man who was probably never big, in an undershirt on the floor of a room where the one window is shut, has been shut. God knows how long. Painted shut maybe, or shut in June against the dust and never fought open again by hands that had lost the strength. You know what to do. That's the strange grace of this terrible summer. Everybody knows what to do because the newspapers have been printing it for 5 weeks between the death lists, and because you stood on a sidewalk this morning and watched Novak do it to a shoe factory man. Get them cool. Fast. Nothing else matters, not the doctor, not the ambulance, not yet. 20 minutes either way. You're back down the stairwell in a fall more than a run, and the crowd parts, and Novak has already read it off your face, is already at the tailgate, and there are maybe 200 pounds of ice left on that truck, the last of 6,000, the company's ice, 7 cents a pound, 40-some stops still load on the route sheet. And Novak looks at it for the amount of time it takes a man to spit, and then he sets the tongs and says, "Take the 50, I'll bring the pick." You take the 50, up 3 flights. You will never afterward be able to explain how, and your shoulder will explain it to you for a week, but you take it up the chimney of the stairwell in one carry, and Novak behind you with the pick and a washtub he's grabbed off a landing, and the second-floor woman behind him with sheets. And this is the thing about the summer of 1936 that the numbers will never hold. How fast strangers became a crew. The heat took things from this city that it never gave back. But it also did this. It taught a few 100,000 people, in the space of 1 July, that a shut door on a hot afternoon was everyone's business, that a dipper gets past, that you go up. You pack him in ice on the floor of his own room, split the block and pack the pieces along his neck, in his armpits, at his groin, against the soles of his feet, and soak the sheets in the melt and lay them over him. And Novak fights the window until it gives with a crack of old paint, and the outside heat pours in, and it is still cooler than the room. The woman fans with a dustpan. Below, someone has found the policeman. The old man's lips keep moving. At some point his eyes travel, very slowly from the ceiling to your face, and his hand comes up an inch off the floorboards, 1 inch toward the cold at his neck. Exactly the gesture the shoe factory man made this morning. The body's oldest vote, cast with its last strength. More of that. Stay. The ambulance men, when they come slow up the stairs because they've been climbing stairs like these all day, all week, and they're grey-faced themselves, and one of them kneels and puts his fingers to the old man's throat and looks at the ice and the wet sheets and the split doorframe and says, "Who did this?" And you feel it in your gut like being caught at something, and you start to say something, some apology for the door, for the company's £50. "This is why he's alive," the man says. He gets the canvas stretcher flat. "Half our calls today we come up these stairs for a body. You gave us a live one, you understand. You gave us a live one." They pack him out with the ice still on him, riding on his chest like cargo, and the crowd on the sidewalk pulls back to make the lane, and there's no cheering. Nobody in this city has the strength to cheer. But the second-floor woman touches your arm as you pass, just touches it, and old Mr. Tillman's voice from the cool alley floats up through your tiredness. They're watering the grass, son, and you think, not here, whatever else, not on this street. Novak writes £50 in the book, in his column, under the morning's 50 and the sheared 30, $1.30 an ice at his own wages, 10% of a week, and closes the book and puts it away, and never once, this day, or any day after, says a word about it. 4 o'clock, 106 and holding, the sun leaning west and losing nothing, and the two of you finish the route with what's left, shorting the last stops with apologies and half blocks, and the customers look at the ice and look at your face and take what's offered, because everybody's route is short this summer. Everybody's everything is short, and then the empty truck rides home light and rattling over the cobbles, and the working day is over. The other day is just starting. The night. Because I need you to understand what night means in the summer of 1936, in a brick city, in the 7th year of hard times. Night is not relief. Night is the second shift of the same heat. The heat the walls banked all day, paying itself out into the rooms, so that at 9 in the evening the inside of a south side tenement is hotter than the street was at noon. The city figured this out weeks ago, the way it figures everything out, by suffering. And it has done the only thing left. It has moved outdoors. All of it. You wash at the plant, a bucket and a chunk of reject ice in it, the finest bath in Missouri, and you eat what the boarding house calls supper, cold ham and warm bread and tomatoes. Nobody has lit a stove in that kitchen since June either. And then you do what 800,000 people are doing as the red sun finally grudgingly goes down. You take your pillow and one sheet, and you walk to the park, and the park, at dusk, in the heat wave of 1936, is a sight that no one who saw it ever forgot, and they said so, all of them, into their old age. Forest Park and Tower Grove and every square of green and half-green in the city has become a bedroom for a metropolis. Families are staked out under the trees in claims, mattresses dragged blocks on children's wagons, bed springs carried on fathers' backs, quilts laid out in rows, and by full dark there are thousands, tens of thousands, lying out under the open sky, the whole social order of the city rearranged flat on its back on the grass. Machinists next to shop clerks next to school teachers, babies in laundry baskets, old women in kitchen chairs, because some bodies can't lie down on ground anymore, sitting up asleep like sentries. The police walk the rows slow and quiet, keeping a peace nobody's disturbing, because the heat has boiled even the mischief out of this town, and along the drives the street lamps hum, and under them the grass is furred with sleepers as far as the light reaches. You find your patch, the same patch as last night and the night before, near a linden tree east of the pavilion, and your neighbours are already in. The pipe fitter and his wife on your left with their 3 kids laid out crosswise on one mattress like cordwood, and on your right the old streetcar conductor who talks in his sleep in German. The pipe fitter lifts a hand. You lift one back. Nobody wastes words. The etiquette of the great outdoor bedroom is 2 weeks old and already iron. Quiet after 10, dipper gets past, watch each other's children, and nobody complains about the heat out loud after dark, because everybody's carrying the same load and the words don't lighten it. You lie down on your sheet on the burned grass, and the ground gives up its warmth under you slowly, an animal warmth, almost companionable now that the sun has quit, and above you, through the slack leaves of the linden, the sky comes out. That's the one gift. The drought that's killing the country has scoured the air to glass, and the stars over St. Louis this summer are farm stars, Ozark stars, the whole spilled sugar of the Milky Way, and you lie on your back with your split hands folded on your chest, too tired to sleep, in that hollow, ringing state past exhaustion, and around you the city breathes. Because you can hear it. That's the thing. 10,000 people sleeping in one park make a sound, one soft, enormous sound, breath and rustle, and a baby settling and a murmur, and far off a harmonica played so gently it might be remembering itself, and under all of it the deep engine hum of the sleepless streets beyond the trees. Somewhere out there the hospitals are working through the night, the fans blowing across the basins of ice, your ice, some of it, the morning's blocks doing their last work in the dark. Somewhere the pressmen are setting tomorrow's temperatures. Somewhere the river is sliding by low and warm between its cracked banks, and west of the river 1,000 miles of scorched farms are lying out under these same stars, and on one of them, in the Ozarks, on a porch, you could walk through blindfolded. Your mother is sleeping outdoors tonight too. She wrote you so. Everyone in the world you know is sleeping on the ground tonight, under one enormous roof. Your shoulder throbs in its socket, slow and regular, a coal banked in the muscle. Your hands lie on your chest and buzz. The cracks at your knuckles have dried and pulled tight, and there's a bone-deep ache in your forearm shaped exactly like the handles of the tongs, and tomorrow at 4:30 all of it starts again. 20 blocks, 6,000 pounds, the shrieking stairs, the melting money, the shut doors. But an old man is sleeping in a hospital corridor tonight in a breeze blown over a basin of ice, instead of lying alone behind a locked door in room 5. You did that with your shoulder and Novak's £50. In the great ledger of the summer of 1936, in a season that will take 5,000 names, you moved one name, one from a column to a column. That's not nothing. In a summer like this, that might be everything a person gets. Sleep, when it finally takes you on the burned grass, takes you shallow. You surface twice in the night, the way everyone surfaces now, and both times the park is doing something. The first time near midnight it's a lantern moving slow between the rows of sleepers, a woman in a nurse's cap walking with a policeman, and they're stopping at certain mattresses, the ones with old people on them, and crouching and speaking low and moving on. The city's public health nurses walking the parks by night. Somebody at City Hall thought of it in the second week of the dying, when they realised the old were slipping away quietly in the dark grass just as easily as behind locked doors. And now there are lanterns in every park in St. Louis, moving all night like fireflies with terrible jobs. The lantern passes you, pauses, moves on. You're 19. You're not on the list of what they're looking for. Not yet, says the ache in your shoulder. Give it 30 years of tongs, the second time you surface. It's the ice cream man. 3 a.m, and a pushcart man has come to the edge of the park with a cart of penny ices he couldn't sell in the noon streets, because they died faster than he could hand them over, and he's selling them at 3 a.m. in the dark to a line of people in nightclothes. And business is brisk, and nobody anywhere in the summer of 1936 thinks this is strange. The night has become the day. The pipefitter's wife buys 3 and carries them back cupped in her hands like eggs, and wakes her children one at a time to eat them, and the smallest one eats his lying down, mostly asleep, his mouth working, his eyes never opening. And if there is a purer image of this whole city, this whole summer, of the small sweetness people kept passing to each other through the furnace, you never saw it. Then it's 3:30, and the sky over the trees to the east is going the colour of a peach pit, and you fold your sheet and walk to work through streets full of other walkers, folding into their own mornings, and the second day begins. I could tell you the second day, stop by stop, but you already know its bones, and so did everyone living it. That was the thing about the great heat, the way it swallowed the calendar. Days stopped having names. The papers said Monday, said Tuesday, but the body said only again. Again the dock at 4:30, the tongs, the frost biting through the burlap, the 20 blocks booming down onto the truck bed. Again the red sun, again the stairwells exhaling their stored heat, the cards in the windows, the coins warm from hands. What changed day to day was only the number on the drugstore thermometers, and the length of the column in the paper, and the small subtractions from the streets. A fruit stand that didn't open, a horse gone from a familiar harness, a card gone from a familiar window, and you learned not to ask about the cards. But 2 things happened on that second day that you kept. The first was at the hospital. Novak swung the route 4 blocks out of True without a word of explanation, and pulled the truck up outside City Hospital at the noon break, and jerked his chin at the doors and said, "Go on, ask after your old man. I'll eat." City Hospital in the 3rd week of July 1936 was a thing that the doctors who worked it wrote about for the rest of their lives. You went in through doors propped wide for the ghost of a breeze, and the heat went in with you, and the wards had spilled out of themselves. Cots in the corridors, cots in the sunrooms, cots on the screened porches, and between the cots the fans, dozens of electric fans, each one aimed across a basin or a washtub with a cake of ice standing in it, so that the whole building breathed a faint mineral coolness that lasted exactly as far as the ice did. Orderlies moved down the rows with rubber sheets and ice water, sponging the burning ones. In the worst hours of the worst days they were packing patients into tubs of ice water whole, the last resort. The body plunged like an overheated casting, and still the ambulances kept backing up to the doors, and still the men kept coming in grey and dry, labourers mostly, men whose foreman had learned nothing or been allowed to learn nothing, and there was a stack of folded canvas stretchers by the door that stood for the ones who arrived past all the ice in Missouri. You gave the old man's name to a nurse whose apron was soaked through with melt and honest sweat both, and she ran a finger down a ledger, and you watched her finger the way you'd watch a coin toss, and it stopped, and she said, "Corridor C, he's taking broth." Taking broth. In the accounting of that July, taking broth was a triumphal arch. He was flat on a cot at the cool end of the corridor, in the wash of a fan blowing over a basin, a small man made smaller by the week, but his eyes were open all the way now, and they tracked you down the whole length of the hall, and when you stood over him he studied your face for a long moment with the frank, unhurried stare of the very old. And then he said, in a dry whisper with a Rhineland edge on it, "The door. Sir, you broke my door." And you began, God help you, to apologize to a man you had carried out of his own oven. You began to say something about the landlord and the frame and the lock, and the old man lifted one hand an inch off the sheet, the same hand, the same inch, that had reached for the ice on his neck, and stopped you. 61 years, he said. I lived in this country. Nobody ever broke a door for me before. His eyes closed. You thought he'd gone to sleep. Then, without opening them, "You come back when it's cool. I'll fix the door. You'll hold the wood. I was a cabinet maker." A long pause, the fan turning, the ice ticking in the basin. "The frame is oak. It will take a mortise. You'll see." And that was all. He was asleep for real then, breathing slow under the fan stroke, a cabinet maker with a repair scheduled on the far side of the catastrophe. And you walked out past the cots and the basins and the stack of folded stretchers, and the difference between the corridor and that stack was 50 pounds of ice and a broken lock, and you climbed back up beside Novak and couldn't say anything for 2 stops, and Novak, who missed nothing, let you not say it. The second thing that happened on the second day was the wind. It came up out of the southwest in the middle of the afternoon, and for one lying minute the whole street lifted its head, because wind was supposed to mean the break, the Gulf air, the fiddler's promise off the radio. And then the wind arrived, and it was worse than the stillness. It was furnace wind, wind off 2,000 miles of superheated, dried-out, dying land. Wind that had crossed Oklahoma and the boot heel picking up heat the whole way like a stone skipping across a griddle. And it came down the streets of St. Louis at 105 degrees, moving 20 miles an hour, and it did not cool the sweat. It drank it. It lifted dust and grit and the smell of the low river and drove them through the streets, and people turned their backs to it as if it were sleet. In the truck it came through the open cab like the breath of an open kiln door. Novak drove straight into it with his eyes slitted and pronounced the whole state of Oklahoma a personal enemy. That was the day you understood the last thing the summer had to teach about itself, that there was nowhere it was coming from that was any better. The maps in the paper told it plain. The heat lay over the middle of America like a hand over a face, from Texas to Canada, and the numbers out on the plains made St. Louis look spared. Steele, North Dakota, 121. Kansas towns at 118 for days on a stretch, the nights never dropping under 90, the wheat cooked in the field, the ponds gone to cracked plates, the cattle sold off in emergency trains or shot in the dry tanks, and the people of whole counties packing what a truck could hold. You'd see them come through the city that summer and all the summers after, the plains families, mattresses on the running boards, headed for California on the numbered highway, and every one of them had stood in that same wind and made the same calculation. There is nothing left here to wait for. The wind blew for 3 days. On the third one, the record fell. You knew it was coming the way stockmen know weather, in the body, before the instruments confirm. The morning of the 14th of July broke wrong. Even the 4:30 dark was wrong, 90 degrees before the first streak of light, the air lying on the dock thick as wool, and the men loading alongside you were quiet in a new way. An old Herman at the chute, who had a barometer where other men had opinions, looked at the sky going up like a lid over the river and said, "This is the one they'll name." He was right. The 14th and the 15th of July, 1936. Ask anyone who lived in this city then. Ask them 50 years on, and they'd tell you where they were on those 2 days the way other generations tell you where they were for wars. 108 degrees in the shade. The hottest it had ever been in St. Louis since men started writing it down, and the hottest it would ever be after, through the whole century that followed. The record standing untouched decade after decade like a scar that never fades. Out in the state it was worse. Missouri towns touched 115, 118. The papers stopped putting the temperature in the headline and started putting it in numerals 4 inches tall, the way they did for elections and armistices. But you didn't live it as a headline. You lived it as a Tuesday. You lived it as the tar first. By 9 in the morning, the asphalt on Gravois had gone past soft into something like fresh licorice, and it took the print of your boot heel and held it, a line of your own footprints trailing you down the block, and the truck's tires peeled off it with a sound like tape. The streetcar company was out watering the rails with sprinkler cars because the steel was expanding hard enough to buckle. And even so, that afternoon, out on the Cherokee line, a rail kicked sideways in the heat with a bang like a field gun, and a car had to stand where it stopped while a crew came with bars. The drawbridges over the river stuck. The steel had grown. Men played fire hoses on the girders to shrink them enough to close. The city itself, the iron and stone and tar of it, was failing the way the horses failed, and the crews went from breakdown to breakdown like medics. You lived it as the silent second. 108 has a sound, and the sound is nothing. By noon, the streets had emptied to a depth you'd never seen. Not just the people gone, but the noise gone. No vendors, no children. Their hydrant corners bare because the kids had learned the wet skin in that wind burned worse. The pigeons down out of the sky and standing in the shade of parked cars with their beaks open, panting, a thing you did not know pigeons did. The city held its breath from noon to 4. Anyone who could stop work stopped. The breweries knocked off their bottling lines at midday when men started going down on the floor. The building trades quit at noon by emergency agreement. Even the courts recessed, the judges sitting in their shirt sleeves, a thing that made the papers all by itself. Anyone who could stop. That's the sentence with the trapdoor in it. Because ice could not stop. Ice on the 14th of July was the difference between Corridor C and the folded stretchers. The hospitals were burning through it by the ton. The calls were doubling, and so at the exact hour when the mayor's office was begging the city over the radio to lie still in the shade, you were on your 40th stair carry of the day with 50 pounds on the roar of your shoulder, and that is how it happened. That is how, at 3:10 in the afternoon on the hottest day in the recorded history of your city, the summer finally came for you. It doesn't announce itself. That's the thing they don't put in the newspaper instructions, the thing you only learn from the inside. There's no moment where the body sends up a flare. There's only a series of small wrongnesses, each one explainable, each one ignorable, stacking up quiet as unpaid bills. It starts on the second floor of a building on Sydney Street, a £50 carry, and the first wrongness is the stairs. You've climbed 10,000 stairs this summer. Your legs know stairs the way your lungs know air. And halfway up this flight your legs simply ask you a question they have never asked before. A slow, stupid question, as if they'd forgotten the procedure and needed it read to them. You stop. You breathe. The stairwell air goes down like flannel. You explain the procedure to your legs and they resume, offended, and you tell yourself it's the hour, it's the 40th carry, it's the wind. The second wrongness is the sweat. You've been reading sweat all summer like a stockman reads clouds. Other men sweat, and now on the landing you notice with a kind of detached professional interest that your own shirt is drying. In this air, in this stairwell, drying. And the clear, cold morning voice, Novak's voice, 5 weeks old now and worn smooth with use, says what it always says. Man stops sweating. Man's half in the ground. And you hear it. You truly do. But here is what the instructions also don't tell you. By the time the body reaches that particular ledge, the mind is already standing on it too. And the mind on that ledge is a slow, agreeable, unworried mind. A mind wrapped in flannel. And it hears the voice and nods along and does nothing because doing something has begun to seem like a great deal of trouble. You deliver the block. You must have. The tongs come back empty. You don't remember the icebox or the coins. The stairs going down have a shimmer on them. The same shimmer the pavement has worn all summer, except stairs are indoors. Stairs in the dark of a hallway have no business shimmering. And the third wrongness is that this observation strikes you as mildly funny rather than as what it is, which is the sound of the last wire fraying. And then you're in the street, and the street does the thing. The light swings. Not the world. The light itself. The whole white furnace blaze of 3 o'clock tilting like water in a moved pan, and there's a ringing coming up out of the pavement through your boots. A high steady note like a wet finger on a glass rim, and your own heartbeat is suddenly audible to you. Labouring, huge, a fist knocking on the inside of a door, and the last thing you see with any order to it is the tailgate of the truck rushing up close, because your legs, without consulting you, have decided the truck is the answer and are spending everything left in the account to get you there. You don't go all the way down. It's the tailgate that saves you, the tailgate and the melt. Your hands, your split, tongue-cramped, faithful hands, catch the wet wood, and you fold onto the running board instead of the stone, and you sit there inside the ringing with the street swinging around its hinge, and some part of you very far away is saying, so, this is it. This is the thing. This is what it was like for all of them. For Stanek with the tong still in his hands, for the shoe factory man, for the old cabinet maker on his floor. This flannel, this ringing, this vast, stupid peace, and that faraway part is right, and that is the most frightening thing you will ever learn about dying in the heat, that it is not frightening. Fear costs. The body on that ledge has stopped paying for anything, fear included, and what is left feels, God forgive it, like rest. Then the world turns to ice water. Later you piece it together, from Novak, from the grocer whose awning it happened under. Novak came around the truck, took one look, you grey, dry, smiling faintly at the middle distance, and did not waste a syllable. He had the tailgate down and the pick in the nearest block in the time it takes to say it, and what he did was not gentle, and was not medicine as a hospital would know it. He broke a corner off a 50 and put it inside your shirt against your breastbone, and a second fistful against the back of your neck with his hand clamped over it, and then he took the dipper and poured the water can over your head. The whole can, and the grocer came running with his produce bucket and poured that too. And the shock of it, the enormous crashing cold arriving on a body that had quietly closed its accounts, was like being born. You came back up through the ringing with a gasp you heard yourself make from outside, and the light swung one more time and settled onto its nail, and the first thing in the world that came back into focus was Novak's face a foot from yours, and the old man was not frightened either, but for a different reason, for the opposite reason, and his voice when it came was the flat dock voice he used for inventory. "There you are," he said. "Sit still. You're not done, but you're not going anywhere either." He kept his hand clamped on the ice at your neck for 10 full minutes, crouched in front of you on the running board like a man holding a patch on a leaking boat, while the grocer brought more water, and the melt ran down inside your shirt and pooled in your boots, and the ringing faded off, and the sweat at some point in some minute you couldn't name came back, broke out all over you at once like weather, and Novak saw it before you felt it, and only then did his shoulders come down off their guard. "Man your age," he said conversationally to the street. 31 days without a Sunday off in this. I ought to be arrested." Then, to you in the same voice, "Route's over. Don't argue." You argued. Of course you argued. You were 19, and there were 9 stops left and 40 men outside the plant gate, and Novak listened to about 6 words of it, then reached out and took your right hand and turned it over, and pressed his thumb quite gently into the base of your fingers where the cracks were and held it up between you, your own hand shaking in the air like a leaf in a draught you couldn't feel, and said, "That's not tired. I know tired. You worked 9 hours already on the day they'll put in books. The last 9 stops I'll carry." And he did. 51 years old, 30 summers on the tongs, and he carried the last 9 stops of the hottest day in the history of the city alone, up the stairwells and down, at the pace of a man walking behind a plough, one carry at a time, while you sat in the shaded cab with ice inside your shirt and the water can between your knees under orders to empty it, and you watched him come down each stoop with the empty tongs swinging, boots first, then the barrel chest, then the cooked leather face, utterly unbothered, and you understood, watching, that you had spent 5 weeks thinking the tongs and the hips and the water were the trade he was teaching you, when the trade he was teaching you was this, was pace, was lasting, was how a man gets to be 51 on the docks, by knowing to the pound and to the minute what a body can pay, his own and his partner's both, and by paying out of his own pocket, ice or wages or the last 9 stops, whenever the arithmetic came up short on somebody else. The city posted 108 at 4 o'clock. Official, the courthouse instruments, and the record was written. You were sitting in the cab of an ice truck on Sydney Street when it happened, with a puddle of your own melt around your boots, alive by the width of a tailgate, and the speed of an old man's hands. That evening Novak did not drive back to the plant by the straight way. He turned the empty truck west, up the long grade of the boulevard as the sun went down into the dust, and he didn't say where they were going, and you didn't ask, and he brought the truck at last up the winding drive to the top of Art Hill, the great grass slope above the lagoon in Forest Park, with the art museum standing at the crest and the statue of the Crusader king on his horse, sword raised, black against a sky like the inside of a peach, and he set the brake and cut the motor and said, "Get out and look. You earned the view. Cost you nearly everything, so look at it." and you stood on the top of Art Hill on the evening of the 14th of July, 1936, and looked at the city that had almost killed you that afternoon, and it lay there below in the last red light, and it was beautiful. That was the outrage of it and the mercy of it both. The grid of streets running off east into the haze toward the river, the smokestacks of the breweries standing quiet, the water towers on their iron legs, the church steeples of every parish and language in the town, German and Irish and Italian and Polish and Bohemian, all of them going rose and then violet, and the first lamps coming on in their thousands, and no roar rising off it. None of the engine hum a city sends up on an ordinary evening, but instead something lower and stranger, the sound of a city out of doors, an immense soft rustling like wind in a wheat field, which was the sound of hundreds of thousands of people carrying their beds into the open air at once, because they were coming into the park below you as you watched. You could see them on every path, streaming in from the streetcar stops with mattresses on their heads, wagons of children and bedding, kitchen chairs, and out across the darkening grass the claims were being staked, the quilts going down in rows, and the same was happening at that hour in Tower Grove and Carondelet, and on the levee and on 10,000 porch roofs and fire escapes, the whole city lying down under the sky, and beyond the city the whole scorched middle of the country, farm by farm doing the same. From the top of the hill you could hold it all in one look. The largest bedroom on the continent, filling up for the night after the worst day of the worst summer anyone would ever measure, and not one person down there quitting. Battered flat, robbed of sleep, burying its old people, water in its rails, the town was doing the one thing it knew, which was the next thing: supper, sheet, ground, morning. Novak stood beside you with his cap off, not for grief this time, just for the small wind that lived on the hilltop and nowhere else in the county, and after a while he said the only summing up you ever heard him attempt. "People are tougher than the weather," he said. "Barely, but barely counts." Then he put his cap back on and drove you home. The 15th was as bad as the 14th, 108 again. The 2 days standing side by side at the top of the record book like grave markers, but you were not on the truck for it. Novak had gone to the route supervisor himself, and whatever was said in that office, you came out of it with a thing that did not exist for Iceman in July. A day off with your job still yours. You spent it flat on your back in the deep shade under the linden in Forest Park with the water can, ordered there like a soldier to a billet, and you did as you were told, and around you the daytime park was its own city, the day sleepers, the night workers, the old people parked in the shade by their families the way you'd park a car, the nurses making their rounds now by daylight too. You slept in pieces, you drank until you sloshed, and by evening your hands had stopped their leaf shake, and the cracks at your knuckles had begun, for the first time in a month, to close, and you lay watching the light go long through the slack leaves and understood that Novak had known to the day, maybe to the hour, how much you'd had left, and had spent his own standing with the company to buy you the difference. Then you went back to the tongs, because the city still needed the ice, and the summer was not done. That's the part the stories always want to skip. The long middle after the climax, and the summer of 1936 had a long middle like a desert has a middle. The record days passed, but what followed was not relief, just a lower circle of the same fire. 102, 104, 99, 101, day after day, into the deeps of July and out the other side, and the city ground on through it, and you ground with it, and the grinding itself became the life. You got harder. That happened without your permission, The shoulder built its callus under the leather pad, a smooth tough saddle of skin and muscle, and the 50-pound carries stopped being events and became strides. Your hands closed over the tongue grips in the morning like they were shaking hands with an old argument. You learned the water discipline to Novak's own standard. The steady metered drinking that never waits for thirst, because thirst you knew now is a late letter, news from a body already in trouble. You learned to read the customers the way the nurses read the sleepers. Which stairwell to climb twice, which card's absence meant a family at the park and which meant a knock. And twice more that summer you knocked, and once it was nothing, an empty room and a family gone to cousins in the country, and once it was a woman on the floor by her stove alive and the ice came up the stairs again, and the second-floor sheets, and the fan of the dustpan and the ambulance men climbing grey-faced, and by then you did it all without the hammering heart. You did it the way Novak split a block, a craft, and that is a thing the summer gave you that it never took back. The knowledge, carried in the hands, of exactly what to do. The old cabinet maker came home from Corridor C at the end of July, 12 pounds lighter, walking with a cane he pretended was a walking stick, and the first thing he did, the first week, was fix the door. You held the wood. He'd told you it would take a mortise, and it took a mortise, and he cut it with a chisel kept sharp through 61 years and a heat wave, sitting on a kitchen chair on the landing because standing was a budget item now, directing you in a Rhineland whisper, and when the new lock shot home in the new frame with a click like a knuckle cracking, he sat back and looked at it and said, "Better than before. Break this one. You'll need 2 shoulders." And from then on, all the rest of the summer, there was a glass of tea waiting on his sill when the truck came down 9th Street. Cellar cool. God knows how he managed it on £25 a day, and you drank it standing on the landing you'd once stood on listening to silence. And neither of you ever mentioned the silence again. The nights ran together into one long night. The park, the linden, the pipefitters' children laid out like cordwood, the lanterns of the nurses, the harmonica. The city government gave up pretending any of it was temporary and started acting like the manager of the biggest hotel on earth. Water wagons made rounds of the parks at midnight. The pool stayed open until 2 in the morning with the lights burning and the water thick with people standing in it. Just standing, like cattle in a tank, and the churches propped their doors and let the sleepless sit in the stone-cooled naves at any hour. And there was a priest on the south side who moved the early mass to 5 in the morning outdoors on the church steps, because he said God had air where the building had none. Nobody thought any of it was strange. The whole apparatus of ordinary life had been picked up, carried outside and set down again under the trees, and it ran there, creaking for a summer, and it held. And the dying went on, quieter, in the long middle, not the front page dying of the record days, but the tax the heat kept collecting at the edges. The old, the sick, the men whose work would not wait, a name or 2 in the paper every day where there had been 40, and every one of them was a shut door on somebody's stairs. By August the numbers men would count it. The hottest summer ever measured in the United States. Before or since, thousands dead across the country, the middle of the nation's map inked in with temperatures no one would believe if the instruments hadn't sworn to them, and a drought under it all that took the corn and the wheat and drove the plains people onto the roads west in a migration the whole rest of the century would tell stories about. That's the summer you hauled ice through, 1 25-pound block at a time. History mostly doesn't feel like history from inside. It feels like stairs. There were Sundays in the long middle too, and one of them deserves keeping, because it was the day you finally went into the water. All summer the water had been the great rumour of the city. the thing everyone was moving toward or talking about or being turned away from. The municipal pools ran like factories on double shifts, so packed through the afternoons that the lifeguards gave up on swimming as a concept and policed instead a kind of standing room only baptism. Hundreds of bodies wedged shoulder to shoulder in 4 feet of blood-warm water that the papers said the health department was dosing with enough chlorine to bleach a shirt. The river was forbidden and therefore full of boys out on the mud flats and off the ends of the wharves, and every week or so it took one quietly, the way the river had always taken boys, and the mothers of the south side ran their evening head counts with that particular summer arithmetic in their eyes. And the fire hydrants and the horse troughs and the fountain basins downtown where by August nobody official even pretended to chase the children out anymore. The cop on the corner standing in the spray drift himself with his collar open, on the theory, universally adopted by then, that the law had melted somewhere around 102. But you, the Iceman, the man who spent all day pressed against the cold, had not once been in the water, because your Sundays until that one had been spent flat on your back cataloguing your own aches, and it was Novak's wife who put an end to it. You'd been fed at their table twice by then, a small ferocious woman named Anka, who ran her kitchen cold all summer like everyone else and apologised for it like no one else. And she took one look at you across the third Sunday's cold ham and pronounced a verdict in Polish, and Novak translated it with visible enjoyment. She says you look like something the plant froze by mistake. We're going to the pool. So you went, the 3 of you, on the streetcar, and the streetcar itself was half the outing. A Sunday car in the great heat was the city in cross-section, rolling, every window dropped, every seat filled at arm's length, the motorman with a wet towel around his neck like a champion prize fighter between rounds, and the passengers riding in the shared streaming wind with their eyes closed. Families with rolled towels, old couples going nowhere at all, riding for the wind alone, around the loop and back, a nickel's worth of moving air, which by July was recognised citywide as one of the honest bargains left in America. A man across the aisle held a block of ice the size of a hat box on his knees, wrapped in newspaper, taking it home for Sunday dinner like a roast, and nobody smiled at it, and it dripped through the paper and through his trousers the whole ride, and he sat there in the spreading dark patch with the dignity of a man who had done his arithmetic and made his peace. The pool, when you got there, was everything promised and threatened. Fairground Park, the big one, an artificial lake of a pool with sand brought in at the edges, and the line to get in wrapped the fence, and inside the fence was humanity by the acre, and the sound of it reached you a block away, a high silver roar of children that had no relation to the flattened noon silences of the work week, because this Sunday afternoon in the water was where the city had agreed to put everything the heat hadn't managed to kill. All the shrieking, all the horseplay, all the courting, all the spare joy, held in trust through the murderous week and spent here in one place with both hands. And you should know, since we are being honest tonight, and this channel does not sell you postcards, the gate that let you through that fence would not have let everyone through. The big pools of that city in that decade were drawn, like the neighbourhoods, along a hard colour line, and the finest public swimming water in St. Louis was for white bathers only, and Mr. Tillman's grandchildren, in the summer that nearly killed their grandfather in a rich man's cool alley, had for their share a few crowded hours at a few small pools across town. The heat was democratic. Nothing else was, and the water least of all. and that stayed true long past 1936, and when it finally began to change, years on. It changed at swimming pools before it changed at almost anything, and it changed hard, which tells you what everyone in that line already knew without saying, that water in summer is not a pastime. It is a share of survival, and people know to the inch when their share has been withheld. You went in. Anchor claimed a square yard of sand with the generalship of a woman who had claimed things in 2 hemispheres, and Novak walked into the shallow end like a fire hydrant entering its natural element, and you waded out into the warm, crowded churn until it reached your chest, and stood. And there is no way to make poetry of what a body that has hauled ice through 6 weeks of record heat feels in that moment. So take it plainly. It felt like being believed. The water held everything up. The shoulder with its saddle of callus, the forearms with their tongue-shaped ache, the feet cooked on 100 miles of cobblestones, all of it handed over at once to something that did not care what any of it weighed. Around you the roar went on, children cannonballing off shoulders, a girl's splashing war conducted under formal rules of escalation. Somewhere a lifeguard's whistle asserting theories no one honoured, and you stood in the middle of it up to your breastbone doing absolutely nothing, which was the rarest activity in your calendar, and Novak drifted up alongside, up to his chin, cap still on. God's truth. The cap stayed on, and the 2 of you floated there in the shouting silver water, like 2 workhorses turned out at last into a pond. 30 years, Novak said meditatively to the sky. I bring the cold to them. He tipped his head back an inch, taking in the acre of water, the whole splashing city. Once a summer it's fair the cold should carry me. Then a child's wave hit him full in the face, and he came up blowing like a walrus and swearing gently in 2 languages, and the cap at last came off. And that is how you always afterward chose to remember the summer of 1936 whenever you got to choose. Not the stretchers, not the shut doors, but Novak at the shallow end of Fairground Pool, 51 years old, bareheaded in the roar, wringing out his cap and laughing. There was one more room in that summer that you should stand in before the wind comes, because almost nobody in the city ever saw it, and you stood in it every day, and it was the strangest room in Missouri, the freezing hall of the ice plant itself. The one place inside the hottest summer in American history where winter was being manufactured around the clock by men on purpose. You went in sometimes at the end of a shift, on an errand or on no errand at all, through the double doors off the loading dock, and the change hit you like a slap from a cold hand. 50 degrees inside, a windowless cavern of brine tanks under a ceiling of travelling cranes, and the great ammonia compressors thundering away in the engine room behind the wall, machines the size of locomotives, running day and night since May without 1 hour of rest. Because the city was drinking ice faster than any plant in its history had ever made it. The air in there smelled of brine and machine oil, and the faint, sharp ghost of ammonia that lived in the building's bones, and your sweat turned cold on you in the first 10 seconds, an actual shiver in July, a sensation so foreign by then that the first time it happened you laughed out loud, alone, like a fool. The ice was born in cans. That's the thing people never pictured. 300 pounds to a can, tall galvanized coffins of filtered water lowered in ranks into the brine tanks, the brine held down around 15 degrees by the ammonia coils, and there the water stood for 2 days and nights, freezing from the outside in, slow, because slow ice is clear ice, and clear ice is honest ice. Ice a customer can look into like glass and see that nothing was hidden in it. Air hoses bubbled in each can to keep the impurities moving to the centre, and the core, the last cloudy heart, got sucked out and replaced with fresh water before the final freeze. You learned all this the way you learned everything that summer, in fragments, from men shouting over the compressors, and it rearranged something in your head. That the clean, cold block on your shoulder, the thing that looked like a piece of nature, like something quarried, was in fact the most manufactured object on the street. Coal was burned in the boilers to spin the engines, to squeeze the ammonia, to chill the brine, to freeze the water, to cool the city that was being killed by the burning of the summer. There was an arithmetic loose in that loop somewhere that no one had time to work out in 1936. The century would get to it. And the tank men. You'd stand at the edge of the hall and watch them work the cranes, hoisting the cans in dripping ranks, tipping them into the thaw sprays until the block slid free with a groan and a boom onto the runway, and the tank men wore wool coats. In July, in the deadliest heat wave the country would ever record, there were men 4 blocks from where the horses were dying who worked in wool coats and complained, genuinely complained, about the chill in their knees, and the dockmen called them the polar bears and envied them beyond speech. And the polar bears envied nobody. But they had their own tax. They went home at night into the 95-degree streets like men diving into warm mud, and the change ran them down with summer colds all season, colds in July. And more than one of them told you the crossing was the worst part, that the body could live in the fire or live in the ice, but hated above everything the door between. Herman, the old chute man, had worked the tanks for 11 years before his knees sent him up to the dock, and Herman was the one who told you about the deep ledger, the thing that made the whole plant make sense. Ice, Herman said, was the city's blood bank, not a convenience, not groceries. He'd been there in the flu winter of 1918, and the fevers came and went, he said, but every summer without fail the ice stood between this town and the ancient dying, the dying that used to just be called summer. Before the plants, before his time, they'd cut winter ice off the ponds and rivers up north and haul it down in sawdust and pray the supply lasted past August. And the summers it didn't last, the babies died first. Cholera infantum, the doctors wrote in the ledgers, which was a Latin way of saying warm milk. Milk went bad in 6 hours in a July kitchen, and the babies drank it because there was nothing else, and the little coffins came out of the tenements every August like a harvest. Hundreds in a bad year, in this one city, every summer for decades. Then the plants came, and the roots, and the 25-pound cards in the windows, and the little coffins slowed and slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. Herman had numbers. Plant men always have numbers. But he didn't give you numbers. He gave you one sentence, leaning on the chute with the blocks booming past, and it stayed. Every block you carry up those stairs, boy, some part of it is for a baby you'll never see. You carried differently after that. Not more nobly, nothing so fancy. The shoulder hurt the same. But on the bad afternoons, on the 60th carry, when the route sheet blurred and the stairs shrieked and some tired voice in you asked the eternal question of all labour, which is what is this for? There was an answer standing ready now, in a Rhineland accent's country cousin, smelling of brine and machine oil, and the answer was, the milk. Keep the milk cold. It is possible to run a very long way on a sentence like that. Whole lives have been run on less. One more thing about the plant, and then the wind. On the worst nights of the record week, the company opened the freezing hall. It wasn't announced. Nothing that summer was announced. The city ran on rumour and kindness, moving at the speed of a stoop conversation. But the word went out through the blocks around the plant, the way water finds a crack, that after 10 o'clock a man with a sick child or an old mother going grey in a top-floor room could come to the side door on the alley, and the night foreman, a silent Croatian named Marko, whose own instructions came from nobody and were never written down, would let them sit inside the double doors on a row of plank benches in the 50-degree air. Not many, a dozen, 15 a night, the worst cases of the nearest streets. You saw it once, coming back late for a forgotten route book. The benches in the half-dark of the freezing hall, the compressors thundering their endless winter, and along the planks a row of neighbours wrapped in the lone blankets Marco kept in a locker. Blankets in July, shivering happily, a baby asleep against a shoulder in the manufactured cold, an old woman with her eyes shut and her face turned up to it like a sunflower run in reverse. Nobody spoke over the machines. Nobody needed anything said. It was the plant's whole meaning, sitting right there on the benches, the fire outside, the winter inside, and a door between them that one quiet man had decided, against every rule in the company book, to leave unlocked. They never caught Marco at it, or they caught him and looked away, which in a summer like that one amounts to the same civic decision. Years on, when the plants closed one by one and the humming boxes took the windows, and the whole trade of the tongs and the cards and the roots dissolved out of the world so completely that children would need the word iceman explained to them. That is the picture the word would call up for you, ahead of the trucks, ahead even of Novak, the benches by the door, the loaned blankets, the row of rescued sleepers inside the machine-made January, while the record summer raged in the streets. A civilization is a lot of things, and most of them are large, but sometimes it is exactly the size of a side door on an alley, propped open after 10 o'clock. But here is what you did not know in the third week of August, hauling through another 100-degree afternoon with the salt tide line white on your cap. You did not know that the summer had already lost. Somewhere far north, over land you'd never see, the air had finally turned, the way it always does and never does when you need it, and a mass of Canadian cold was coming down the middle of the continent like relief marching to a siege, and it had a date with your city, and the date was a night at the end of the month, and you would be awake for it, and you would never forget it. And this is where I want to slow all the way down, because everything until now has been the fire, and this, at last, is the water. It came on a night that began like all the others. You'd swear to that ever after. Everyone would. No sign. The evening air over the park was the same used, thick, blood-warm air, 94 at sundown, and the quilts went down in their rows, and the harmonica man found his tune and lost it, and you lay under the linden with your hands folded on your chest, and you went down into the shallow water of park sleep, and the city breathed its one soft, enormous breath around you. And at some hour past midnight the leaves moved. You heard it before you felt it, out of sleep, the way you'd learned that summer to hear everything. A sound up in the crown of the linden that had not been there in 6 weeks. A long sifting rush, and your body knew before your mind did. Your body sat you upright on the sheet with your heart going. Because the last time the air had moved it had been the furnace wind, and then the air arrived, came down through the branches and across the grass and over the rows of sleepers, and it was cool. Not cooler. Cool. Air with an edge on it, air from some entirely other country, moving steady out of the north with the smell of rain in it somewhere. Actual rain. Somewhere behind it in the dark, and it poured across the park like the tide coming into a bay. And the city woke up. Not with alarms, with a rustle. You heard it spread away from you in every direction across the dark grass, the sound of thousands of sleepers surfacing at once, and then, in the lamplight down the rows, you saw them beginning to stand. The pipe fitter was up. His wife was up with the baby on her shoulder. The old streetcar conductor stood up out of his blankets in his union suit, with his arms held a little way out from his body, palms forward, like a man warming himself at the opposite of a fire. Up and down the rows and away under the far trees, all across Forest Park, the whole sleeping city was getting to its feet in the dark and turning north, faces into the wind, nightgowns and undershirts pressed against bodies, hair moving, hundreds of them, thousands, standing on their mattresses and their quilts in total silence. And nobody said anything, because there was nothing to say that the skin wasn't already saying, and that is the sight you will carry longest of everything the summer showed you. A city of the survived standing up together in the middle of the night to feel the wind. Then the silence broke, and it broke into pieces. Somewhere off toward the pavilion a man began to laugh, a big rolling helpless laugh, and it caught like fire in dry grass. Laughter running away down the rows, and under the laughter, other sounds. A woman quite near you crying without any noise, the way Mrs. Vasiliauskas' neighbour had cried on the sidewalk in July, her hands over her mouth and her shoulders going, and children waking into it and shrieking for the joy of shrieking, and the harmonica man, bless him wherever he lies, finding his instrument in the dark as playing, oud and jaunty and ragged, the first loud music anyone had made outdoors in 2 months. The pipe fitter's smallest boy got off the mattress and simply ran in a great circle on the cool grass with his arms out like a swift, around and around for no reason and for the whole reason. And the old conductor watched him go by and said, to no one, in German, a sentence you didn't understand and understood completely. Before dawn the rain came. You heard us walk in across the park roofs of leaves, and nobody ran for cover, not one soul. The whole city lay back down on its quilts and let it fall on them. Warm rain going cool, rain on burned grass, rain on upturned faces, rain hammering the dust flat and running down the slopes toward the lagoon, and the smell that came up off the ground, the smell of wet earth, after 2 rainless months, was so enormous, so old, so exactly the smell of the farm you'd left in May, that you lay there in it, with your eyes stinging and your split-heeled, hardened hands open at your sides, palms up, catching it. That was the end of it. Not all at once. There would be hot days yet in September, the summer retreating with its teeth showing. But the siege was broken, and everyone knew it by sunrise, and within a week the parks were emptying at night, the mattresses migrating back up the stairs they'd come down, the bedroom windows of the city standing open to genuinely cool dark, and people slept, really slept, whole nights at one stretch, and for a while that autumn you could pick the citizens of St. Louis out from any visitor by a certain look they had, the look of people recently and deeply fed after a famine, except the food was sleep. The ice went on. That surprised you somehow. You'd half thought of the ice as a creature of the fire, but the cards stayed in the windows through the cool bright fall, £25, 50. The boxes still needed feeding, and the work turned almost gentle, the blocks losing nothing to the mild air, the stairwells just stairwells again. In October the company kept you on for the winter, cutting the routes but keeping Novak's truck whole. And Novak, informed of this, celebrated in his fashion, which was to nod once and observe that now you'd get to learn what February did to wet tongue grips. The old cabinet maker's tea went hot instead of cool on the same sill. Mr. Tillman's alley thermometer read 61 in the shade, and he reported it like a man announcing a birth. The city put its coat on, and the summer of 1936 folded itself away into the place where cities keep such things, into the marks on the record books that no later summer would touch, and into the stories, and the stories are where you come in. Because you're still there, you know, all of you. Come down to one evening then, since one evening is how this whole story has worked, and let it be a Saturday at the end of October, because that is the evening you'll remember when you're old, more than the record days, more even than the night of the wind. Nothing happens on it. That's why. The route finishes early in the cool months, the light going amber by 5, and you walk home from the plant with your jacket open, an actual jacket, a garment whose existence you'd forgotten by July, and the walk takes you down 9th Street because your feet take you down 9th Street. They've worn the habit into themselves, and the street in the October evening is a different animal wearing the same brick. The doors stand comfortably shut and mean nothing by it. The windows are gold. Behind them the stoves are lit, all of them, the whole block cooking at once for the first time since spring, and the smell stacked in the stairwell air, cabbage and onions and coal smoke and baking. The old smells with the fear taken out of them, and children are on the stoops in sweaters, and nobody, not one person on the whole length of the street, is watching anybody else for the grey colour and the dry skin. You didn't know you'd been doing that all summer, every face, until you felt yourself stop. The cabinet maker's window is lit, 3rd floor rear. The card is gone from it for the season. The icebox runs on the October air now, the poor man's refrigeration, the window box built out over the sill where the milk keeps itself. But you can see the lamp, and the shape of him crossing it once, slow, cane and all, a man in his room with his door on its new oak frame, and you stand on the far sidewalk maybe half a minute in the smell of the block suppers, doing the thing you'll do at odd moments for the rest of your life without ever telling anyone, counting him. One name, one column to the other. Then you put your hands in your jacket pockets, which is its own quiet luxury, hands at rest, hands warm, and you walk on. At the corner, the drugstore thermometer, your ball game, your casualty list, reads 54, and no one is looking at it. That's how you know a catastrophe is truly over. Its instruments go back to being furniture. You buy the paper at the corner stand because you buy the paper now. A 19-year-old with a newspaper habit. Another thing the summer installed in you, and the front page is elections and Europe and the price of hogs, and the weather is 4 lines at the bottom of a column, fair and cooler, and you fold it under your arm the way Novak folds his, and the man who sells it to you says cold enough for you, and that's the new liturgy. The winter call and response already warming up, and you say it'll do, and both of you smile at the whole idea of complaining about cold, this year, on this street, and neither of you says why. Nobody in this city has to say why. That's what a shared summer builds. A floor under all the conversations, solid, invisible, walked on by everyone. Supper at the boarding house is hot and heavy and eaten indoors at a table. Stew with actual steam standing over it. And the landlady has the radio on. And the radio at some point reads the temperatures of the cities the way it did all summer, out of habit. Omaha 51, Kansas City 49, and it means nothing now, it's just geography. And you sit there with your spoon halfway up and feel the strangeness of that. The same voice, the same list, the numbers washed clean. In July, that list was read like the names of the dead. Now it's a lullaby. Same words. The difference is only everything. And then up to your room, which is yours again, which is a place a person can be, the window cracked 2 inches to the cold night air because your body demands it now, and will demand it all your life. You'll be 60 years old and driving your grandchildren crazy, sleeping with windows open in January, and everyone who lived through the summer of 36 will be doing the same in their own houses, a whole generation that never again fully trusted a shut window. You sit on the edge of the bed and take account, because it's the end of the season and men take account. Here is what the summer took. It took Stanek and the shoe factory man's easy stride, which never wholly came back, and it took Mr. Tillman's neighbour and the grey gelding on Broadway, and hundreds of names off this one city and thousands off the country, and it took the Plains farms and sent their families down the highways west, and it took every illusion you'd carried off the farm in May about the city being a machine that couldn't be stopped. You watched the machine stop. You watched the rails buckle and the bridges swell shut and the water pressure die like a pulse. And you know now, in your body, where the line is, how thin the margin runs under all the brick and iron. About 8 degrees. That's all it was. 8 degrees past the worst ordinary summer held for 6 weeks, and the 20th century in the middle of America came down to dippers and ice tongs and old men's hands. And here is what it gave, because you make yourself say that column too, out loud almost, in the cold little room. It gave you the trade in your hands and the callus on your shoulder and Novak's whole religion of pace. Learn the one way it can be learned. It gave you the cabinet maker and the tea on the sill, and a door you will help repair again some day, you're fairly sure, since you intend to know that man until one of you is done knowing anything. It gave you the sight of a city carrying its beds outdoors and lying down together, and the sound of 10,000 sleepers breathing, and the nurses' lanterns, and the pushcart man at 3 a.m, and the boy running his circles in the first cool wind, and the standing crowd with their faces north, and the rain on the upturned faces, and you would not trade the seeing of those things you find for having been spared them. That's a hard sentence, and you turn it over twice to check it, and it holds. You'd keep the summer, not for the fire. For what stood up in the fire, in other people, in yourself, at the top of a stairwell with your shoulder against a locked door. Barely, Novak said. On the hill. People are tougher than the weather. Barely. But barely counts. It's the whole history of everything. That sentence. When you get down under the dates, you turn out the lamp. The cold air comes over the sill in its steady 2-inch ration, and the blankets, plural, another restored word, come up to your chin, and the bed takes your weight the way the burned grass used to, and the city outside the window makes its winter sound now, thinner, indoors, chimney smoke and streetcars and a dog somewhere. All of it wrapped and private. 800,000 people back behind their own walls with their own stoves, every one of them carrying the same summer folded away inside them like a discharge paper. And this is where you and I let him go, the boy with the tongs, because he's earned his night, and because his night is your night. That's how these stories work. You've been carrying him for an hour, and he's been carrying you. So let the account close. You're warm enough. Say it the way they learned to say it, that year, like a found fortune. Warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. There is water when you're thirsty and cool air on your face and no route sheet nailed to tomorrow that your body can't pay. That's more than the summer of 1936 gave anybody for 6 straight weeks, and they made it through on less. You'll make it through on this. Let your hands go loose first, the way his did, finger by finger off the tongs. Whatever your hands carry today, they're done carrying it. Set it down on the dock. It'll keep till morning. Everything keeps in the cool. Let your shoulders give up the block. You've been hauling something up stairwells all day too. Everyone is, every day. And the top floor got its delivery, and the stairs are behind you, and the pad comes off the shoulder now, and the ache can bank itself like a coal and go dim. Let your breathing find the park. 10,000 sleepers on the dark grass, and every one of them found the same slow rhythm in the end, because there's only one. It's the oldest rhythm there is. In and out, tide and tide. The sound a city makes when it has decided, all together, to trust the night. Join it. You're in the Rose now, somewhere near the Linden. The lanterns are moving far off, and they are not looking for you. The harmonica is so quiet it might be remembering itself. Tomorrow there will be work, and weather, and the world. There always is. But that's tomorrow, and tomorrow is on the far side of the dark, and between here and there lies the whole cool night, paid for and yours. Centuries turn, you know. The tenements come down, the towers go up, the machines hum in every window now, and the summers still come, and some of them come hard. But the record of that one stood and stood, decade after decade, 108 in the shade. The summer they measured all others against, and longer standing still is the other record, the one no courthouse instrument kept, that when the worst of it came, the doors got opened, and the dipper got past, and the ice went up the stairs, and the city lay down together under the trees and got up together in the wind. People are tougher than the weather. Barely counts. It counted then. It counts tonight. So let it come now. Let sleep take you the way the cool wind took the park, moving down through the leaves, across the grass, over the rows, one sleeper at a time. Let the world fade. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. Everyone who makes it to the end of a long day has. Take it, and dream of rain on burned grass and wind from the north and morning coming cool. Good night.